My name is Shudhij Kapoor, and the President and Vice Chancellor here at King's College London. So a very warm welcome to all of you who are here, especially to our colleagues from beyond King's, and I see some of you over here. What I was saying is there is something called a Buffalo Springfield moment. I don't know if you've heard the song. There is something happening here. What it is ain't entirely clear. And I think one had to characterize the state of AI. There's absolutely no question that this is the kind of technology which will probably change our lives. We just don't know how fast and in what way. And that's the part that's not clear. And to just put boundaries around it, because I think I'm looking at your vintage and you'll be able to relate to this example. Two examples. When the first Apple smartphone with a swipe came, I was a BlackBerry user. I could not imagine. I thought, like, who needs to swipe? It's got a keyboard, it works. And what will you do with swipe? Because what you're really doing is texting messages. You'll have to type anyway. And you can see how that has totally changed the world. But then there were MOOCs when they came around. They were accompanied by the very same hype. Universities were going to go out of business because MOOCs were going to take over. Who will pay fees when you can have a free MOOC? But frankly, nothing has happened in MOOCs. It's good, but it's not. So I think we are precisely in that kind of a period where on the one hand, you have really thoughtful people like, what's his name, Daniel Cocchiello from the AI Futures Project, who has provided a precise timeline how between March of 2025 and April of 2027, superintelligence will come to be. You can go to their website. They tell you what will happen in June of 2026. They just wanted to put it out there so that they could be proven wrong or right. But they have a very carefully stepped, and they argue, a sort of research and evidence-based argument of why in 2 years you'll have superintelligence. And then there is Professor Narayan at Princeton, who says it'll take 40 years, that this is just a normal technology. It'll take time. You can see all these spectacles, but by the time the humans change and adapt and this innovation diffuses in society, it'll be no different from electricity, and it'll take 30 to 40 years. And it is precisely when you have that wide range of predictions from otherwise sensible people that you need someone with perspective. And I think our speaker today is someone who has perspective. So Sir Bashir started out in this business designing energy-efficient chips, not today, but almost 35 years ago. I think Bashir is one of the few people who has depth of experience in startups, in industry, and academia. He's been thinking long and hard about this question. I think it wouldn't be wrong that amongst the vice presidents of research in universities, he's probably the one who's most invested in this question and knows and understands this field better. And of course, he's decorated and recognized from a fellowship of the Royal Society to the knighthood of this kingdom for his contributions. So with that, it's a pleasure, Bashir, for you to tell us how this will take shape. There you are.
Shudhij, thank you. Good morning, colleagues. I think I want to start by sharing with you how I got to the title of this talk. I've been in academia for just over 3 decades, and there are many things I enjoy about being an academic. And one of them, mentoring, supervising, working with very smart PhD students, master's students, postdocs, young academics, senior academics. And over the last 3 decades, I have graduated 52 PhD students. Given ChatGPT was available from November 2022, I started to see the dynamic changes. For the first 6 months, I used, and I refer to it as chat from now on because it's easier. I used chat really just to edit my emails or to clarify things I'm not sure about, but I did not use it for research. I think a year down the line, sort of summer 23, I started to read, I started to engage more with students in this university and other UK universities, universities abroad, with academics like myself. And I could see the dynamic has shifted quite a lot, to the extent that how often do you see your PhD students now? Well, not as much as I used to see them before. And that got me thinking about what is going on. I enjoy 4 things in supervising PhD students. Number 1 is when I read a paper or multiple papers where I identify gaps, which I think these papers have not done, or perhaps the approach they have taken could be done in a different way. I enjoy thinking through how we're going to design our approach to address the problems we identified. I enjoy thinking through the experiments we're going to do, the computational models we're going to develop. And the part I really enjoy most, albeit the most painful, is when we come to write the paper together. I don't think anybody here who has experienced al-Hashimi's style of paper writing. I used to say to my PhD students, if you do not tell me in 2 words why this is worth reading, it's not worth doing. And then they blind you with science. And I said, the science is yours. Tell me what is novel about this paper. So this is what sort of got me thinking about, well, it looks like our role in the scientific journey has changed. But I did not want to lose the enjoyment of doing things before large language models. So I wanted to understand the dynamics. And even though, I'm referring to humans, to be honest, if I were to be selfish, what is my role in scientific discovery? And I hope you will see details in terms of reflecting and giving you examples of what I mean by that. I have used LLMs, so that's the disclaimer. The example you will see have been used by LLMs, and some of the observations I have made have become deeper and more thoughtful through the use of LLMs. So I want to start my presentations by having this, what is now becoming commonly accepted assertion, that without training and appropriate oversight, the use of LLM has the potential to undermine it. So this is really very, very negative. So what I hope by the time I finish my presentations, this is not what we should be amplifying. We should be amplifying exactly the opposite. I do not want AI to become a shortcut for research. I want AI to become a force multiplier. I do not want AI to become a competitor. I want AI to become a partner. I do not want AI to limit my intellectual development. I want AI to accelerate what I can do with an intelligent machine. So with that scene setting, let me show you how I suggest that we will get there. Again, when I talk to colleagues, sometimes I talk about different steps in the research process or the scientific discovery journey. And I think they could be captured around the 6 boxes, depending on where you are. There are those who are still looking for our research problems to be worked on, which is of really a typical PhD program, at least in STEM, or at least in the area I work in. We identify our research problems, then we identify the research questions, and then we will do a literature review, and then we will find out the gaps, and then we will develop the hypotheses, then we will carry out the executions, whether computational, experimental, theoretical, and then we analyze it, and eventually we communicate it. I think the communications part of research process, LLMs do a lot of already. I cannot think of a PhD student who currently does not use LLMs to edit their papers. If they're not, well, they should be, because this is very much doing something which it will do better than you, And to be honest, the intellectual contribution is limited. I used to spend ages working alongside my PhD students, deciding on the right form of words. Okay? So I'm going to spend time trying to articulate how LLM can enhance the research journey, a research problem, assessing current. Late, I think it's December 2023. That was the first time when I started to use chat for research. The area I'm interested in is what we refer to as edge AI. That could be anything you like. So edge AI is very much how do you make mobile devices more intelligent? And that means it's hardware, it's software, combinations of the two. The question is, where do you embed all that intelligence in training? You could do it on the device, or you could do it on the cloud, or you could do it in between. And really, edge is that what it's referred to. So now I am mimicking how would I do a PhD supervision in the age of LLMs. So I said, what are the two research problems? And tell me the most influential papers. Any academics in the STEM subject, perhaps even non-STEM, may start like this. Because that's what I used to do with my 52 PhD students. So gave me two research problems and lay them out in a very academic fashion. The problem, why is it open, and a highly influential paper, and so on. So these are the first two observations I will make. Well, the two research problems appear plausible, but without domain expertise. Domain expertise is very much the skills, the knowledge that you have developed over the years studying and researching a field. Won't be able to establish if they're open researchable. So without the domain expertise, then what the output looks good, but you cannot judge. Observations two is they are indeed highly cited papers, but not everybody agrees on these are the two most highly cited papers. So I hope that emphasizes the role of domain expertise, and I will come later on in terms of how we could enhance further the domain expertise and not replace it. Then I went a little bit further. Again, I'm really mimicking how I was supervising my PhD students before LLMs. And I said, let's pick up the first open research problems. What will be the two most promising research questions I can research that are worthy and leading to publications? This is exactly the sort of things I do with my PhD students. Tell me why it is worthy. Do you think it will lead to publications? And again, came back with a problem statement. Why is it valuable? Potential contribution. This is exactly what I would have done with my PhD students. Give me another one. I'm not going to go through a detail, but just to share with you in terms of how it lays it out. Problem statement, what's valuable. So I want to have an observation here. Are these promising research questions would lead to new knowledge and publications? And I think the simple answer is you do need domain expertise. So I think by domain expertise here is, as a PhD advisor, as a postdoc mentor, I want to be able to evaluate the originality of the work. I want to be able to pick out of the two research questions, which one are really more worthy than the other. So what you get from the LLMs looks good, but you still need domain expertise. So let me share with you now how I felt when I saw this type of output. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. I was genuinely stunned. I thought, my God, I feel so inferior. I feel so small. Do I have a job? Am I a researcher? And that got me to think even deeper. that what we should not do is to let the LLM overwhelm us. Because you've just seen that what it gives out is very plausible, but you still need your domain expertise. You still need to use your judgment. You still need to be able to say this is original. You need to be able to say this would likely to lead to publication. So observation which is not there, but I really want to emphasize it, that do not let the LLM make you feel inferior. I think you should see it as this is a very powerful technology, and I want to engage with it to get the best out of it. And this goes back to, I do not want to use LLM as a shortcut or to replace me, but rather to make me better. So far is very much around domain expertise. Then as I started to learn more about LLMs, I started to realize that there are a general purpose LLMs like ChatGPT and like others, but also there are purpose specific LLMs for particular areas of research. So I'm interested in energy efficient computing. So I said, give me an example. Came up with the one which I have heard about before. So picked up the right LLMs for research only in a particular domain. So two observations here. That having convinced myself that LLMs are powerful, but they're not going to make me irrelevant, I'm going to make sure, as you will see later in the slide, how I'm going to get the best out of them. But I've accepted that they do things a lot better than I do around the speed and efficiency, around papers. They summarize papers for me. They identify gaps in the literature. But that still does not mean I'm blindly just going to follow it. I'm going to use my judgment and my experience to see whether what is being put out is worth doing. The domain-specific LLM, which is really the purpose-specific, to use them, they are not straightforward like ChatGPT. You're often going to need to have some programming skills to do them. And they will allow you a much greater research implementations. And there are many PhD students worldwide who are developing such LLMs for a particular research problem or particular research questions. So then as Kshitij said, that the pace of change or the pace of progress so fast in this. So DeepMind came up with an LLM for research collaborations. This is not a general purpose one. It's for research collaborations. And they were deliberate in saying it is to help experts and not aimed at automating the scientific process with AI. So at least DeepMind have acknowledged that they're not going to make humans redundant. They're going to make the human better in performing their research. And such tool, the AI co-scientist, is built as a collaborator. It's not publicly available, so it's not an open source. So that is a breakthrough. Last summer, that's published by the BBC. The problem, the tool was used, or I say the technology was used, addressing why some superbugs are immune to antibiotics. So this is the big research questions. And those who work in this area, and I've spoken to few, and I've also been informed by my colleague Tom Folks, that researchers spend a lot of time identifying questions, designing the experiments, and they evaluate the results. So imperial researchers, what they have done, they use the tool, but they have put to the tool something which they have been investigating for a decade as a hypothesis. And they have not published it. And the tool came back with that hypothesis and provided another four. And one of them completely new. This is remarkable Because what that means, when one could say, because the example I have shown, by the way, just for comparison, that there were really gaps in the current literature, which it does not take a very experienced academic to spot. Even it does not take a first-year PhD student to spot. But this is remarkable, because that hypothesis was not published. Yet, the technology has found that hypothesis and a few others. And that is remarkable. This tool is developed for biomedical sciences research. And my prediction is there will be more of these tools going forward. And we're already seeing it. ARIA just got a current call around AI scientists. I must admit, I'm disappointed that they are moving towards complete automations of the scientific discovery. I think it should be to collaborate with the humans. But also what's happening, there is progress being made around autonomous laboratories. This is now, if you remember the research process, it had something around executions. So if you're doing experimental research, then now they're moving towards using robotics, machine learning to design the experiments. And I'm delighted a colleague of ours in engineering, Dr. Miao Gu, recently secured £500,000 from ARIA to do exactly an autonomous lab. Again, when there is commercial opportunities, there will always be companies who will say, come and we'll help you. So this is such company. They will even charge you $5 for manuscript generations. It's not the company I would like to work with. Right. In my talk, at times I may come across as a philosopher. I'm not. I may come across as being aspirational, and I think I am. That's what I want to do. So this is something I would like to express views on. And again, I hope that there will be questions afterwards. So are we moving towards full automations of scientific research? So I have, listed the obvious, that human activity is to ask questions. And the breakthroughs often comes from what we know, but we do them a different way, or we join the dots. We still human need to remain accountable for decisions, implications, and the communications. So observation 6 is full automations may be possible, but it will not be realistic or desirable. And I don't think over time, is it partial, is it full, going to be binary? I think there are certain steps in the research process which will be fully automated, and there are certain parts which will be partially automated. But overall, there will be enough for a human to do. This is I thought you'd be interested in this. Orkin is a startups in Europe. They have done a survey recently, really interesting report, spoken to 200 chief exec, chief technical officers, research directors of biotechs. Orkin are interested in automating drug discovery. And the outcomes of the survey was really interesting. Number one is companies are not really interested in the automation of the science because they don't trust it yet. But what they are interested in is to accelerate the regulations process. They accelerate the communications. These things take time. And the message from this, that we should not just assume everything's going to be automated and we're going to be irrelevant. I think there are good use of such technology to automate things which we know it will help us to do the science better. As I said, it's because they are yet to have trust in the results. Also, they identified data curations. We all know that big complex research has got a lot of data generated. There are different types, how you put them together, how do you harmonize them, how do you clean them, how do you make them available for different purposes. So I think automations will happen more and more, but perhaps not where we think it will happen, which is the science itself. It's what's around it. I've said right at the beginning that I do not, as I said, having felt inferior to LLMs, I put myself together and I said, no, how do I engage with a machine that emulates my intelligence and communicate with me using human language? What is it I need to do to make the machine tick? And the more I realize, the more I come down to is what humanities and social scientists researchers do daily, is critical thinking. In STEM and health, we don't do enough critical thinking because we're driven by problem solving. But we do. I'm not saying we don't do it completely. We do, but we don't do it in a structured way. Critical thinking helps you in what is the alternative? How do I interrogate the model reasoning? How do I understand how it arrived at this solution and not another? Critical thinking helps with that. What I've also realized that if you were to give the same research problems to, let's say, 5 PhD students and it's very likely they will use LLM, they will do their own prompts. And from what I have seen, and there are not many examples, but then you could share with me your own examples if you have such examples, that the way we think, our lived experience, the assumptions we make influence our prompts. And different prompts are likely to create different outputs. So I think the idea of getting group to discuss and share their prompts and combine them will actually move us towards what we all know. If you want to build a good research team, you need to bring diversity of thought. And I know this is not an abstract idea. To me, this is really one of the things that a human needs to do more of, is how do you build diverse team using LLMs? And you could do that, at least from the experiments I am doing, is where you get them to develop their own prompts, bring them together, share examples, and develop that diversity of thought. Give us some thought, and please share with me if you've got any views on this. So I think it's critical thinking and domain expertise are key. I was delighted that King's just introduced such an undergraduate degree, AI in philosophy, started this September. And if you look at the curriculum, it talks about what I've just talked about. So moving now to 3 observations. I think we need to become critics of LLMs, but in a positive way. Human-generate knowledge. We send it out for peer reviewing. Sometimes we get the response saying, absolute rubbish, I'm not happy with this, and it'll upset you. So I think we really need to not feel inferior to LLMs, but to be critic of LLM, so that we could check for accuracy. We could develop our intellectual ability. But you could do that if you have developed strong critical thinking and insight. The ability to articulate complex ideas with evidence as you do your prompting. Equally, we want LLM to develop us further. The examples I have given right at the beginning, what I call this is basic use of LLMs. I did not provide any context. I did not provide any of my ideas. I did not provide any constraints. I did not provide any priorities. I just done a shortcut. Do it for me, right? I think we need to start to become a lot smarter, and it's already happening. How can we use the LLM to stimulate our thinking? How can we use the LLM to check our novelty? How can we use LLM to check our assumptions and so on? The last one is around domain expertise. I was asked these questions when I presented this abroad recently. The question I was asked is, can the LLM accelerate my domain expertise? Or even worse, can LLM replace my domain expertise? We know LLMs are stochastic. They have a degree of uncertainty, which means that whatever they put as an output, you cannot just take it as 100% correct. So I will argue that the foundation for domain expertise needs to be built by humans. But that does not necessarily mean we cannot use LLM to accelerate our knowledge. And to be honest, I am a really good example of that. I think I've learned a lot more about critical thinking in philosophy over the last 12 months than I would have ever been able to do if it wasn't for LLMs. So the starting point for domain expertise has to be human, because the LLMs are stochastic. And for those who are interested in, can you adjust the degree of uncertainty within ChatGPT? Yeah, just like any model, you can play with that through our API. And to be honest, I've experimented with these, and sometimes you could get it to give a lot more inaccurate results by adjusting some of these parameters. Right. Again, that's observations based on the questions I was asked. So, are LLMs co-supervisors? Are they co-authors? I would like to refer to them as their co-creators. They're not co-supervisors, because PhD is not just about academic supervision, it's also got a non-academic element to it. I'm suggesting that rather than having PhD students and supervisors, now we have a PhD student, supervisors, and an LLM in a three-way partnership. And the PhD students' doctoral development will accelerate. Perhaps we'll be able to deal with more complex problems because of the availability of LLM. Supervisors have a crucial role in balancing that partnership. And again, to me, there are two extremes. PhD students could rely so much on LLM, the supervisor will drop out. And the other extreme, PhD students will not use LLMs at all, which is not a good idea, because we know they could help. So the question is, well, can you give us some examples of how you develop that trust? What I would suggest to my PhD students when they start, I give them 3 papers, and I encourage them to be disciplined not to use LLM just yet. Take the 3 papers, produce a summary, tell me what has been achieved, and where are the gaps. Come back with your prompts. I will do my own prompts, and we work together to test the LLMs. And from the examples I have done so far, the LLMs will get it right. That's a degree of trust. You need to encourage your students to do a piece of work already and get them to feel even better when what they get from the LLMs actually align with what they have thought. And as that practice becomes norm, which is very much that I'm not going to just do a shortcut, I'm going to do my own thinking a little bit. I will write good prompts. I'll get to develop further and further. The complementarity, I honestly think PhD students, maybe 6 months after when they start their PhD, is they start to use LLM on a regular basis around paper summaries and around literature review. You still need to use your judgment to decide on the originality and whether what is being put out is worth pursuing. But they need first to gain trust of the tool. The collaborations, I think, as I said, is the worst thing we could do is to see LLMs as a competitor. It must be a partner. So I think I prefer to use LLMs as co-creators rather than co-supervisors and co-authors. And again, there's my last bullet points around humans needs to be responsible and accountable for what's been published. So according to that definitions, LLMs cannot be co-authors. But things may change. But where we are now, that's what the position is. So observation 11. I am convinced, maybe you're not convinced yet, that LLM can actually support research and supervision rather than weaken it, if we develop a healthy relationship with the LLMs. And healthy being, I'm not going to just use it as a shortcut. I want to do my own thinking first. I want to do my initial prompts. I want to write it in a way which will allow me to develop intellectually more by checking the novelty, checking the assumptions, give me the alternatives. And 12, it's a really interesting one. So we know there are certain steps in the scientific discovery are going to be shortened. So what are you going to do with that additional time then? I think we should spend more time now discussing, debating, building, creating. And also, we should really think about the impact of what we do. And what I mean by the impact here, you know you will publish a paper. You know LLM is going to help you with the editing. LLM may have already helped you with identifying the problem in the first place. LLM might have even helped you in some of the coding you need. Why not now think about, could I move beyond academic beneficiaries? Could I think about this work has a social value, cultural value, economical value? So I think impact needs to become now perhaps just as important as the research in itself. And that's going to require culture change. Again, I was asked, well, how would you then go about providing a training course on this? Again, these are just really very basic ideas. I think it's the critical creative competence. I think that is a key. I think that the counter questioning, that, test reasoning, multiple perspectives. I think using different LLMs, ChatGPT, Copilot, they tend to give different answers when you push them. What I mean by pushing them is when you really write prompts that is likely to challenge the output that can come from the LLM. I think the last one is around policy, is we need to continue to help our students, our researchers, ourselves, research integrity. And with this in mind, Russell Group, about 18 months ago, came up with 5 principles for generative AI in educations. There's nothing there which one would disagree. AI literate. You need to use them effectively. You need to ensure academic rigor. It's all very well. There isn't such thing in research yet. There may be something in the near future. But I've also want to give credit to Nigel, Rebecca, who lead our King's Doctoral College, have worked with with our associate deans for doctoral studies. And King's has been clear about this policy, or at least guidance. Are students allowed to use generative AI tools when writing their thesis? The answer is yes. That's really good. It's not ambiguous, because that's what it needs to be. But also, they need to have full responsibility for what's in the thesis. And I think these policies and guidance needs to evolve with time. And we need to go beyond just policies. We need to start to provide training in line with what I've been saying. Right. My 2 final slides. I will state the obvious. I think the boundaries between human and artificial intelligence is not easy to draw. I think we need to not only accept, but work ways to deal with intelligent machines. Just like with any human relationships, you need to find a way of trusting the machine. And the way I trust the machine now, actually by doing some initial thinking, by almost predicting what's going to come out. That's how you build trust. So it's not just a black box and I don't understand it. And the example I used, to deal with human beings, you play to their emotions sometimes. We use persuasive writing, or, we build an argument. We provide evidence. And I think we need to do the same thing with machines. But the machines have no feelings. They like structures. So we need to provide clarity, context, assumptions, constraints, priorities. So it really does like structures. Machines like structures. I think we need to not to feel inferior to LLMs, but actually to act as a peer reviewers of LLMs. That means we need to have expertise. And my last slide. And again, I used LLMs to help me to come up with the quotes. So what is the current situation then? It is very likely, very, very likely, LLMs will continue to improve. So the way I describe the current status is 20th century, famous Italian novel. If we want things to remain the same, things must change. Our president has used this slide in one of his presentations in the past. What I really mean by this, PhD degrees have been awarded over the last 3 centuries. PhD students, postdocs are the engine of our research. We want that to continue. But that means we need to change. So how do you change? And again, 18th century Spanish poet came up with this. Someone asked, where's the path? And the response was, well, you need to create the path. Human beings are not born with a path where they're going to get to. Human being actions, choices will take them where they will end up. And I think that's really what we have. By not changing, we will not benefit. Changing means we're going to need to make new paths. Some of it will take us further. Some will perhaps stop after a little walk. That's what needs to happen. With that in mind, I will stop. And I really hope that some of the observations got you thinking, because what I wanted to do here is to get some collective thinking so that we don't just say, well, LLM is going to take over. LLM is here to support us. And I'm convinced if we have a healthy relationship with LLMs, they will be there to help us, not to replace us. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions. Looks like there's one already. Great, 2, 3. Who wants to go first?
Hello, hi. I'm Leanne Hammercott from King's Culture, and I'm really interested in the whole area of collaboration. In our work, we have a lot of collaborations with partners, and we set out very clear terms of agreement. We look at shared goals, and collaborations are often a very two-way or multiple situation. And I'm wondering if this kind of true collaboration with LLMs, what's the LLM getting out of it? How do we truly collaborate with a system where we're trying to set up these kind of terms of reference and agreement? And is it not therefore a service provider for us? Is it a collaborator in that sense? Just quite an interesting area.
You see, it is a virtuous circle. What I mean by that, human trains the machines, and the machines help us to gain more skills. So I think, it's at the end of the day, machines are trained, and through collaborations, they are trained in the right way to do the things that we would like them to do. So to me, it's not really a one-way collaboration. It's not one-way collaborations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. It was a great presentation. I'm Irini Pepitropaki from Brickburg University of London. I would like to ask, since you posed the skepticism around like the critical thinking and problem solving, during the understimulation from the LLMs models, we have already kind of first MRI data that kind of base the underdevelopment of the prefrontal cortex. So how, as educators, are we supposed to kind of engage with our students to kind of create the critical thinking needed and the problem-solving abilities if the prefrontal cortex is understimulated?
Yeah, I think those from humanities and social science will challenge me if I'm wrong. I think critical thinking can be taught, but it needs to be practiced through prompting. And, critical thinking has been taught human to human. How do you teach critical thinking, critical insight with an intelligent machine through prompting? That is really the challenge. So, for example, I will be very specific. The two examples I have given around, identify a research questions for me to address, which would lead to publications. To me, that is very basic level of interactions. An intermediate level, I will provide the constraints. For example, I will say, I would like the solutions to be of that shape, not that shape. And I will also say, I would like it to be optimized for this and not this. So another word is, I am using my critical thinking skills to shape what the LLM will produce. So I think the critical thinking, it's not implicit. It needs to become explicit in how you engage with the LLM. I hope that sort of, or at least partially answers your question. If not, then I think we could follow up.
Hi. Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. I'm Anna Pagani, Department of Engineering, although I'm a social scientist as a background. And it was a very informative presentation addressing some difficult questions. And I would like to bring to the table another difficult topic related to AI. So you've mentioned a few times the need to accelerate the research process. And I want to unpack a bit the assumption that it is desirable to accelerate such a process, because we are all aware of the tension that there is now between AI and how the process is undermining the same system that is catering for our survival to a certain extent. So data center and AI are dispossessing marginalized communities and silencing some local knowledge that is very important in this diversity of thoughts. And so I just wanted to hear your thoughts on whether within this framework, what exactly acceleration will mean and what it is desirable and why and how it could convince a PhD student to use it when their moral values are against that.
Look, really great questions. First of all, I think accelerating scientific discovery for the sake of knowledge using LLMs needs to be thought through again. I think if we identify what are the really complex scientific discoveries that are needed for the human benefits and what cost we need to pay for that, that is really what I am promoting. Just doing more incremental research to train more PhD students using LLM, that is not the approach. And one of the observations, if you recall, I said is we need to debate more. We need to think more about what would really make a difference to humanity. Because I often say what we should not do is to have LLM at the cost of the earth, which is what we need to avoid. But I agree. But again, we talk about research environment, talk about research culture. To me, this is a healthy engagement with the LLMs. What is it being used for? And what are the benefits? And if the benefits are just a scientific paper, that is not enough. But if it is an impact, which it would lead to social, cultural, societal, economical, then I think it is worth doing. And I think that's what we should be doing. And again, data curations to me is also a very important area. Engineers, computer scientists, and perhaps even health researchers are obsessed with data. And I think we should start to think, what what would constitute a useful data for the problem we are solving? And how can we think about repurposing some of the data we generated already for different projects? And again, it is, to me, this is sort of, research culture, research environment way of thinking. To me, this is healthy way of engaging with the LLMs. And it should not, and I repeat, using LLMs so that we could double, triple, quadruple publication. That is not the goal. And we should be saying it.
Hi, Andrea Principe. I'm a professor at Lewis University in Rome and visiting King's College Business School. Thanks for the compelling presentation. I've learned a lot from a different perspective. Yours, you're an expert in digital technology with a focus on energy. I come from innovation studies, and I remember when I was a PhD student, I remember reading papers by illustrious economists who were saying, well, when we have this kind of boost of productivity and cannot be ascribed to anything but technology. So it was the kind of residual.
Yeah.
So each of us was actually saying, let's understand what the residual is all about and see how this impact us as human beings and our society. From what you're saying, I think now the things are reversed, because it's actually now humans that are the residuals, of course, in a positive way. If it is so, then what's next? You mentioned the importance of domain expertise in the light of the changing which is happening and the relevance of critical thinking. And I buy it as an approach, but how can we go forward or further in terms of playing a role as kind of residual, to make this residual more impactful? In other words, do we have any anchor here from even from an academic viewpoint? And this is what I've been thinking the last few months, and so I'd like your reaction. One way of looking at this residual is the work by Herbert Simon, who actually was Nobel Prize in Economics, by the way, the father of bounded rationality. And he put forward this idea of ill-structured or ill-defined problems. And he argued that we are basically, we human beings, at the end of the day, we are problem solvers, which is true. But increasingly, as we also mentioned, LLMs can be actually much better than us at solving problems. So, and so the point that Simon made, well, then the issue is problem framing. That is where the creative, the critical thinking comes about. So if it is so, then shouldn't we sort of focus on or make sure that we evolve as human beings, as designer of problem-solving cycle? And so focusing more on problem framing. But this, of course, has to do with any single profession over and beyond education and research.
That's a very deep question, but let me try to answer it, or at least attempt at answering. I think humans are no longer in the driving seat of scientific discovery. And the sooner we recognize that, the sooner we try to work out, well, where do we add value? I think where we add value is by creating, as academics, by creating the right research environment, research culture for students to engage healthily with LLMs. To me, that's number one. Number two is really not to be obsessed with paper generations, but to be obsessed with solving the problems that a human alone cannot do. Another word is I need something else, right? In my area of research is, today some of the chips you have in your mobile phone, it has got more transistors than a human being. 3 decades ago, we had 100 million transistors. Now we have 20 billion transistors. To go from that number to that number, we needed to use tools. So I think it's how can we use technologies such as LLMs to solve problems which a human being so far has not solved, right? I think. And the third one, which is really a point I've already made, is around we need to pay attention to the cost. Are we prepared to pay for the energy we need to train and the data we need to store. So I think all of these things would require us to think. One is we're not in the driving seat anymore. We could become irrelevant over time if we have not trained or is created the right healthy research environment. And at the end of the day, these technology are here to solve problems. And we should be the one who's defining what needs to be solved. And I think is that way of thinking, and again, that's why I said I'm an engineer, but I am sort of on the danger of becoming sort of an amateur philosopher. But I hope you can see where I'm going with this. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Sarah Main. I'm visiting here from Elsevier today. Thank you so much for the talk. It was really interesting. I wanted to share one observation and ask one question. The observation I wanted to share is from a survey that Elsevier recently did of researchers globally that overall points to a rapidly increasing use of AI in research by researchers globally, but still very low trust in AI. And also observations from researchers that they feel that the governance and training in their institutions is not yet sufficient. So first, I wanted to congratulate you at King's because it seems that you're definitely leading the way in trying to do that. The question I had was on your observations. Your observation number 7 was about peer reviewing the LLM, humans peer reviewing the LLM. And I like that turn of phrase to capture that activity. And I was reflecting on things that I've done in my own work using LLMs. And I think one of the things that makes that difficult is that the LLMs are very good at analysis at scale. And so, in my case, I was working with colleagues to assess the whole of the UK's research output in relation to the government's 5 missions. And so I didn't know what the answer to that was before I started. And I've got a scale of output that's very difficult to assess, piece by piece. And I was thinking, well, that's not that uncommon in research. Often that happens. But what we do then is we rely on methodology. We think, well, have we created a robust method? So I just then wanted to ask you what you think about that, because you've talked about different AI tools and they are all different, very different. And I think there is a risk that we have a lack of understanding of the methodology that the AI is using. And so therefore, how can we be good peer reviewers of LLM outputs at scale when we don't a priori know the answer, but it's creating new output and we need to be confident on the method?
Sarah, brilliant question. And to be honest, that's at the back of my mind as well. I think let's start at the beginning. Thank you, Kshitij. I think to start with, we need to help researchers, PhD students to develop a degree of trust with the tool on things which they know the answer to. But over time, the tools will be able to produce outputs which human perhaps would not have the knowledge or at least facts to prove it or not. I think it's building trust is key, but that does not necessarily mean that human should be able to validate the outputs of LLMs every time. But by not building any trust, I worry that those who are using LLMs have no idea when they deal with scale. I agree. I mean, I'll give you specific examples. In the early 90s, I wrote a book around computer simulations. And I know this is very, very specific. We build experiments for our undergraduate labs where they build an electronic circuit, use the computer simulator, and what they saw in practice and what they saw on the computer aligned really well. And the students said, why do we bother to build circuits? It's painful. It's soldering. It's components. Why do we build everything on, or build a computer model for it? The same experiment. We changed something in it. We just changed different components in it. The students did the experimental results. did the computer simulations. But the correlation was not there at all. The good students will say, well, I've done everything right, so this is not down to me not getting the circuit right. Something must be wrong with the model. The students who are perhaps have not thought about it more, they will say, well, my circuit is wrong, and they keep fiddling with the circuit. When the circuit really, all it was just you take two components and you replace them. So the message from this is the computer model was correct under certain circumstances, but it will fail under other circumstances. And that's what we taught the students, that do not trust the model for every scenario. And I think this is to go back to the methodology, is, if I'm not well, I may be able to say, well, which part of my human organs, but I don't need to understand what's underneath it. It's like it's like, computer chips, 20 billion transistors inside a chip that size. I'm an expert in this area. Not every single transistor works, but somehow it gives the right output. So I think the methodologies are absolutely, and that's something I need to think about, but we need somehow to bring in the methodology without getting bogged down with the algorithms and reinforcement learning. So we need sort of to abstract how much knowledge of the methodology is needed to evaluate, to critique the outputs of LLMs when they're dealing with the scale. Please.
Touching into your amateur philosophy that you've been working on in this space, LLMs are based on the level of knowledge that humans have generated so far, as are researchers. So why, in your opinion, is this polarized situation where you've got some people that completely don't trust it, some people that are completely sold onto it? And why is it different seeing an LLM to seeing a new colleague coming into your system, into your research department on a trust basis?
I think that polarization is down to human nature, right? Humans have different views on the same thing. I think the pace of progress with the LLMs have been so fast. Humans have not really had the chance to think deeply. As I said, when I started to experiment with it, to be honest, I really felt inferior, right? I felt intimidated. I thought, my God, how am I going to take a PhD student now when he or she could say to me, well, look, you're not needed anymore. So I think it is the power of the LLMs tend to cloud human judgments. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I personally don't have ego. I think I have got now to the stage of my career where I want, just I have done over the last 3 decades, where I'm brave enough and confident enough to say perhaps what young academics or young PhD students wants to say, but they cannot say it. So I'm here, I'm almost like becoming sort of as the voice for those who are saying, well, look, LLM is changing the scientific discovery journey. Are we changing with it? And do I have a job when I finish? And again, and I know we don't have time, the way I convince myself in terms of am I developing with the LLMs? I almost say basic level, intermediate level, advanced level. And I really encourage you to sort of set this as targets, right? Because you need to develop with the LLM capabilities so that you feel and you gain from this powerful technology. And rather than saying, well, I'm so basic, the LLM is so powerful, and that become sort of imbalanced relationship. I hope I've answered your questions. I think there's one final question.
Yeah, we're on time. So last question.
Thank you very much for your talk, and particularly your notes about domain expertise. So this is a mixture of comment, I think, in reply to my external colleague from Birkbeck. So I am from the library at King's, and I was so happy to hear your talk because we've just set up a new training. So it's a 1.5 hour workshop, and it is
it's almost as though we're working together because it goes along with a lot what you've said
Right.
about the critical approach towards Gen AI. And then you're talking about, how do we develop that critical, especially for younger students, maybe those who haven't come across those before. So it's been a sort of like experimental one. A lot of like what you're suggesting, the idea of experimenting with different AI tools. So we've been using ChatGPT and Copilot as well. And it's aimed very much at beginners. So those who haven't tried it before, maybe those who are new to critical thinking or those who are new to university. So, I mean, you're welcome to come along, although I think it will be a little bit too basic for everyone in this room. So my question to you is, what happens when people are no longer beginners? What happens even if they know about machine learning, they know how the LLM is made? How do we foster criticality in more advanced users?
The simple answer is I don't know. I honestly don't know, but it sounds like, you may have ideas in helping us with that. I mean, I don't know whether you are connected to King's Doctoral College and yeah, you are. And also there are training done by RMID, by the Center for Doctoral, for research staff around generative AI. So please, let's develop this one further. What I said is criticality. I don't have much experience in this, but it sounds like you've already got something which our students and researchers will benefit from. And I'm glad to hear this. Let's make sure that we have it visible to across the university. Exactly. And I think I said, Bri, please, could I suggest that maybe we need to make the connection within our MIT and King's Doctoral College, but thank you for sharing that information. Colleagues, it looks like I'm told that I have done my bit now. Thank you so much for coming. And I hope what I have said will encourage you to think a little bit more and develop that healthy relationship with the LLMs. Thank you.